Hi, and welcome to this month's Q&A for May 2019 for Patreon members donating at $5 and up. Thank you so much for your donations, and I have a whole bunch of questions that we've gathered together. There's only a couple of you this month, so you're each going to get a few questions in, and then we'll go from there. So we're going to start off with some questions from Gustav. So Gustav's first question is, what is your motion graphics skill level? I consider myself not a motion graphics artist, first of all. Um, I would say I'm kind of on the intermediate level. I'm pretty okay at doing motion graphics if I have some sort of visual reference to work off of. Like I can see something and kind of recreate it a lot of times. Um, but usually the problem becomes when I need to actually design something and I don't have a lot of reference to go off of. So I've tried to take design classes to help that sort of skill. But nowadays, I tend to try to basically avoid projects that require a lot of motion graphics skill, or if they do, then I'll get someone other than me to help me out who just knows motion graphics because I'd rather just pay them to do what they do well rather than me spend even more time doing something which won't look as well. So I would say I'm intermediate, but I wish I know the buttons to push, but just it's a very very deep program, so I'm not an expert by any means. I'd say I'm pretty okay for an editor. Okay, next, how did you learn motion graphics? I learned just through a whole bunch of different tutorial sites. Good place to start is videocopilot.net. They have a lot of good basics. Um, I've also probably worked off of lynda.com, and then also there are a lot of really good tutorials on schoolofmotion.com, which you can use. They also have a lot of courses, which that's where I took my design course. I took it from schoolofmotion.com. And then there's just a lot of other, YouTube channels, like EC Abrams. There's a lot of stuff out there. But it was just really just doing tutorials, and actually what helped me most usually was to have a project first and then have to basically find out what I don't know so then I could look it up later on and figure it out. So for example, when I worked on the game Battle Block Theater, I animated cutscenes for that. I had to do a lot of I had to learn a lot of new things in After Effects in order to pull that off. So it's really just little by little, and then reading some books, but I don't do so much of that anymore because like I said, I'd rather focus on kind of concepting trailers, editing them, doing capture, and then get someone else to the graphics. Okay. So the next is, what is the minimum level of motion graphics skill required? I mean, that really depends on what you're working on. If you're making a trailer for a game, which is maybe like a prestige sort of thing, kind of like if you think about like movies that win Oscars, tend to have pretty understated graphics. It tends to be just like nice typeface and I don't know, a little bit of glow or something like that. But some things like some games like have really crazy motion graphics because they're kind of very like video gamey and animated. Whereas something like Firewatch tends to, it wouldn't really make sense to have really big flashy graphics for that. So this question really depends on what it is that you need to do. I mean, is your question, what is the minimum level to get hired? The minimum level to get hired is to know more than the person hiring you, basically. um, so, or if you want to get a job, someone saying, hey, I need a video editor and I need them to know motion graphics, then that's up to that person. Everyone's going to have a different kind of level of skill that they need for their particular job. So it's all kind of relative. Sorry, that's probably not a very satisfying answer, but that's the answer I can give you. Okay, next. What is your workflow when working with external motion graphics artists? So I haven't done this a whole lot, but so far my process is to have a rough cut of the trailer and then in some cases some storyboards so I can just sketch something out and say, okay, this thing should be here, this should be here, and then this should move over here. Or in other cases, maybe I'll actually do a really crude design in Photoshop which, it doesn't move, but everything that needs to be on that frame will be in there. And then another thing that's good to do is build mood boards, which is, if you just look up mood board on Pinterest, you'll see a lot of examples of that, which is basically just taking a whole bunch of references from lots of different places that maybe they have a very similar aesthetic to what you want to pull off, or you want the other person to pull off. Maybe it could be exploration of color, that sort of thing. So that's another thing that you can give to the other person, but it also depends on the person that you're hiring, because if the person that you're hiring is maybe like an art director, they just have lots and lots of experience, and really you just need to tell them the goals and they can just run with it, then that person won't need as much direction. But if someone who maybe they just know After Effects, they don't know design, they just need to be told every single little thing that you want them to do, then of course you'll have to give them some more material to work with. But storyboards help just to conceptualize, and then everything else, you should talk to the person that you're working with, basically. Okay, and we'll move on to Matthew. Matthew asks, what time constraints do you work with in freelance? So usually when people contact me to do a trailer, I ask for at least 3 weeks, but I have turned around some trailers very quickly, like Quadrilateral Cowboy and Ooblets I did in 5 to 7 days, which those were a rush. And those are also an exception because those also had really, really good debug options in those games, so it made it much easier to capture. But it doesn't leave a lot of time for feedback. I'd like to have time for feedback because otherwise we're just saying ship it. But if the client looks at the trailer and is like, oh, we need to fix this and this, and there's just no time, then that's not good. So it depends project to project. I usually ask for at least 3 weeks. 2 to 1 is fine if I'm really, really crunched and I really want to do it. But I'll usually hand it off to someone else if the project isn't kind of like speaking to me. And then on top of that, there's just a big time constraint. But nowadays, it's more 3 weeks and up, which is good. Okay, next, how long does it take you to get to version 1? So I would say the way that I work now, version 1 is kind of basically what ships at the end of the process, because like if you work at a big agency in like Hollywood or something like that, usually version 1 is like as polished as physically possible a product that you can have with the footage that you have. Of course, if you have you're working a movie and their visual effects aren't finished yet, of course they don't expect you to have those done. But usually it's kind of like a voila sort of thing where it's like, here's the thing, this could ship right now because the sound design, the music, everything is as good as possible. And then we're showing it to you, and I hope you're impressed. But the problem with working that way can be that, if the direction's totally wrong, you just spent so much time doing that sort of thing. But in those circles, you kind of have to, because people are really not good at looking at rough cuts. And you're working with people who are paying you lots and lots and lots of money, so they want to see the big shiny thing. But so when I work now, I start sending stuff as soon as I can get some feedback. So I usually send like an outline that could be just video of text, and then maybe music, that sort of thing, and then descriptions about what's going on, and then maybe some storyboards. So then they're working with me each step of the way, so then that we don't have to run into that situation where I took the wrong direction and then we spent all this time capturing and refining and everything like that. And I said, aha, version 1, it took me 2 weeks to do this. Do you like it? So I work more iteratively now. So version 1, at this point, my sequences don't say version 1 until everything is all nice and polished and this is like at the end of the process. So the answer is basically the end of the project is when version 1 ships. But there are little tweaks afterwards. But if you're gonna say for like, I don't know, like a fan trailer that I made, uh, version one for like say like Uncharted 4 fan trailer, like 40 or 60 hours. Okay. Next, how does working for an agency differ from freelancing in games? It's a big difference. I mean, just first of all, I'm working from home right now, whereas at an agency, I'm at their office, so you're working with other people, and in that situation, I'm usually just the editor, and I have very, very little creative input beyond the things that an editor can do, which is like the timing and maybe the order of events. But even then, a lot of times it could just be kind of written already, and I just have to make the timing and everything really good. And then, of course, at an agency, I'm just an editor, so I'm not picking my projects. I'm getting the projects given to me. Whereas at home now, I'm fortunate enough that I can look at a project and decide whether or not I want to work on it. So I get to work on pretty much only stuff that I want to. So not pretty much. I only get to work on I get to work on stuff that I only want to at this point, and I'm super duper lucky. Not everyone's in that fortunate position. And then schedules can be different. Maybe something will take, you'll have less time to turn something around. Maybe you could just have times of day when you're just kind of doing a whole lot of nothing because you're waiting for someone to get back to you, but you have to be on site at all times, so you can't like leave. And then of course, freelancing or having your own independent business, the big difference is that you have to do everything else, like your accounting, and you have to get the gigs, and you have to just do all the things that a business needs to get done, other than the editing, capture, and all that sort of thing. So I would say, as an agency, I get to specialize more, but I have less creative flexibility, and I can't pick my projects. Okay. So next, is agency life good or is it a massive grind? It depends. Um, it depends on who you're working for and also kind of which industry, which actually that kind of gets into the next question, which is what are the differences between working in games and movies? So I would say it's been my observation that schedules for movie trailers are much more difficult. The really big companies, they have people come in at night. They're night editors. So then that means that a trailer is being worked on all hours of the day, basically, because just the schedules are that intense. But my experience in games has been less overtime. There's been comparatively much, much less overtime when I worked at video game trailer agencies, because they're only really, around like E3 is when it gets super duper busy. You're shipping a whole bunch of things at the same time. Whereas movies, it kind of always felt like you could be busy at the drop of the hat. When I worked as an assistant and I'd be leaving at the end of the day, my friends would be like, just leave before the phone rings, because the phone might ring and then you'll be here another, 5 hours or something like that. So movie trailers are definitely, they can be very time intensive. And then, is agency life good? Your definition of good would be different from someone else's. But if you mean like kind of like work-life balance and all that sort of thing, it also depends on who you're working with. Because if you're working with people that you don't like, then of course you're not going to enjoy it. But if you work with people that you really do like, then it'll be much, much easier to go to work and have fun. And then the other differences between working in games and movies is that movies, you don't make the shots. They ship you all the footage, and there might be a little bit of leeway or something like that with some visual effects or something, but probably not. But games, you have a capture team, so everyone, you have this team that are making the shots for you, and you have to concept that whole thing out. So it's kind of like editing and also virtual filmmaking, which that's a really, really big difference between the two. And then the other things are like, games in their trailers need different things than movies, because movies, it's always a story. You don't need to teach the audience how to watch the movie, whereas in games, the trailers need to a little bit teach the audience how they interact with the game when they're watching the trailer. I mean, some games are very kind of game mechanic light, and maybe you can make it more movie trailer like with just focusing on story and dialogue. But most of them, you still need to have people understand a little bit about how the person interacts with the game. And I'd say those are the big differences. I also have some blog posts that answer some of these questions. They might have some things that I don't remember to say right now. I'll link them in the comments when I post this on Patreon. But yeah, so this was the Q&A for this month, May 2019. I hope the questions were satisfactory, and thank you again. All right.